we're in the 12th parak, I think, of Ma'aser Korbanos, right? Last thing we talked about was in Yud Zayin, we mentioned that the Kohanim are allowed to spice up the menachos, right? You're not worried that spicing the menachos will cause the menachos to leaven, right? They're not supposed to leaven the menachos. We saw that there's actually one mincha before they said they actually are supposed to leaven the mincha, the lachmei toda, which is not necessarily a mincha. Why? Because it's not sacrificial. There's no kmitza done to them, right? The lachmei toda, the guy who brings the toda has to just bring a lot of bread. So he has to make that leavened bread. So how does he leaven that bread? He says that he brings a certain amount of sourdough and he puts it into the vessel. And David, so we have my circumstance. Oh, good, we're here. Okay, so this is the 12th parak. Let me put on the screen for everybody.
The Rambam says that even if he puts those spices in the matzah, it's still considered matzah.
Yeah, it's not going to cause leavening. Spices are not, even though it gives the food a sharpness. People add a havamina. You add, or can even make it sour. Let's say you put a spice that has sourness to it. So they associate that with leavening. Kamash Malan, it's not leavening. It's not the type of thing that would make it puzzle. Remember, the Kohanim, they cannot leaven that which is burned on the altar. Neither can they leaven that which they eat. Okay? All the parts of the menachos that the Kohanim eat in the Yazara cannot be leavened. So you would have thought that perhaps somehow spicing it leavens it. Kamash Malan, it does not. And we mentioned before that they said salting could cause leavening. And also, Rabbi rejects that out of hand. He was salting the matzah. Remember, he made make matzah, he salted it.
Yeah.
Okay. That's not to my taste. If you're making matzah good enough, you could salt it. That's fine, but it comes out much better if you just don't salt it. That's what we found. The kids like it.
Wow.
We make such, all due respect, I think our matzah tastes a lot better. Okay, it's my own system. The kids like our matzah. It's very, very good. I'm not saying anybody's matzah is bad. I'm just like, we make some pretty good matzah. Okay. Let's see this. Bechametz mincha psula putter. Let's say a person leavens a mincha that's already come pasul. Let's say the mincha was contaminated or was taken out of the azara or something like that. So the mincha became disqualified for consumption and for sacrificial purposes. So now you'd think that there's no prohibition. There's still prohibition. He's not just going to be punished for doing it. Shnemar asher takrivu laHashem lo te'aseh chametz. Those that are offered to the Lord should not be made chametz. Okay, haksher Hashem lo apsula. So this prohibition of not leavening the mincha applies to the mincha that's still kosher, not the one that's pasul. So a person leavens that thing, so he will not be punished. Still prohibited. Remember, every time the Rambam says pater, it's of usur. Chimitza keshehi ksera. Let's say he leavened it while it was still valid. Oy. V'yatzalachut. And then he removed it from the temple courtyard, which, by the way, invalidates it. And then he added more leavening to it. After it had already been disqualified through leaving the temple courtyard, so he will not be lashed for this. Oh, we have a question came in. Hold on. Oh, it's Robin. Okay. Oh, okay. Anytime. Thank you for listening. Okay. If he leavened it while it was already at the top of the mizbeach, remember the Kohen has to climb up the ramp, right? And then put the komets or whatever it is. If it's a Kohen's mincha, the entire thing is burnt, right? Let's say he leavened the mincha once he was at the top of his mizbeach, right before putting it onto the fire. Shnemar asher takrivu. Okay, so it says anything that is to be brought to God. This has already been brought. It already made it to the top. So now, if you were to leaven it, he also will not be punished. He kshera. Okay, it's kosher. Okay, it was brought up to God. It was still kosher, and then he leavened it. So now he disqualified it, but he only disqualified it once it would already technically gotten to that point where it was brought to God. So now he shall not be lashed for this sin. Well, good technical aspects. You can imagine how much often these types of things happen in the temple, where they'd have to apprehend the Kohen or whoever else was doing these things. Remember, it could be a Jew was preparing the mincha. The Jew is to turn the mincha into, bread. You saw there's a few different ways to turn them into bread, right? So a Jew could leavened it, and they would have apprehended him and say, "Excuse me, buddy, we're going to have you brought before the Sanhedrin now. There are people here who say that two guys have warned you not to leaven that mincha. Now you'll be tried for this, and we have to see, what the situation is." Okay. Hamachametz lechem aponim. Let's say a person to leaven the showbread. It says that there were certain families preparing the showbread every week, right? This is Friday. So he is to be lesh. Nemar, kol hamincha, all meal offerings offered to God. And even though the lechem aponim don't have an active kmitza, and none of the lechem aponim is burned on the altar, lechem aponim are made whole, placed on the table, and then after they've been on the table for a whole week, that Shabbos they're taken off the table and eaten by the Kohanim, right? So that's not that the Chiddush is that. So where's the sacrificial part? None of it's burned on the Mizbeach. It's all eaten by the Kohanim. That's still considered a meal offering. Aval minchat nesachim. What's minchas nesachim? That's what's brought in conjunction with a meat animal. Person brings an animal, a behema, so he has to bring a minchas nesachim with it. Not for a bird offering. Bird offerings don't have minchas nesachim. Minchas nesachim means the bread and the wine that accompany the meat. Ein ben malkut. So also he's not to be lashed for leavening these. Sheim gibla b'mayim. If he were to knead this with water, okay, it's a soles, right? It's supposed to have soles b'lula b'shamen, right? The minchas nesachim is supposed to be soles mixed with oil. We said it's not one of the baked breads. The minchas nesachim that comes with, let's say, a bull or a ram or a lamb is just supposed to be the soles mixed with oil. It's like a couscous, basically. It's not turned into bread, so there's no water in the mix. The minchas that are turned into bread also have warm water plus oil, right? And we saw there's 4 different ways to bake that bread: 2 ways in the oven and 2 ways of deep frying it. So the fact that he put water into this, so remember, the only way it could become chametz is if there's water in the mix, right? So just adding water already ruined it. So you're gonna say, oh yeah, but now it becomes chametz. He's adding sourdough to make it, leaven somehow, leavening the couscous. It doesn't really matter. He already ruined it. V'im gibulav b'shemen shel nesachim. Let's say he kneaded it. He put a lot of oil from the nesachim. Okay, shemen shel nesachim. So what's going to happen? May peiros hein vein machmitzim. Okay, if he tries to mix this around with just oil, that's not going to cause leavening. Why? Because oil alone is may peiros, and all the so-called may peiros in their natural forms do not allow for leavening. What's he talking about? Well, there's a big difference here. Is oil like water? Most fruit juices, it's more of a Hilchot Pesach. Most fruit juices are basically what? What's their main component? Water. They're mostly water and sugars and things like that. Wine, that when you squeeze grapes or you squeeze apples and pomegranates, the main component of what comes out is water. Oh yeah, there's sugars and acids and all sorts of other things in there. The oil that comes out of olives is not water. There's no water content there, basically, right? Olive oil, it doesn't have water in it, right? And it's not what comes out of the olive. Water comes out. But there's a rule that Chazal found, and that is when you squeeze anything from fruits and mix that with flour or mix that with wheat, whatever it is, it does not allow chimutz to happen. It does not leaven. So oil, you understand. You mix a dough with just oil, you're not going to get leavening to happen. Try it at home. It's not going to work. Okay? That's why most brownies and cakes, if there's no water in the mix, it's just oil and eggs, they're not leavened. They're technically matzah ashira. What about water-based fruit juices? Wine, apple juice, pomegranate juice, orange juice, types of things used to make egg matzah. Leavening doesn't happen either. Why? They all have pHs that are too low to allow the leavening process to happen. Water, when you add water to flour and you mix it out and just let it sit, eventually it'll start to rise. But if you use straight up orange juice, or even orange juice has the lowest pH, if I'm not mistaken. Lemon juice and orange juice are very acidic. Apple juice is also very acidic, but less so. It has a higher pH. 7's high, 7 is neutral, and the low pH is like 3 or 4, right? Grape juice also has a low pH, significantly lower than 7. All these juices, if they're regular fruit, have a pH that prevents leavening from happening. So that's what Chazal said. Basically, you make a matzah. Your dough is basically just apple juice or wine or grape juice. Usually that's what they use: apple juice, wine, or grape juice, plus eggs. Eggs is also, that's not even made peiros. That's not fruit. You mix that together with your dough, you are not going to get a product that could leaven, even if you leave it alone forever. Yeah, it might spoil. That's called seirachon. but it's not going to leaven. The usual brands of Machon Shilo, egg matzahs, usually use eggs and a combination of some sort of fruit juice. The most common fruit juices I've seen on the package are apple juice, wine, or grape juice. I think Manischewitz also. There's some in Israel they use wine, and in America they use apple juice or grape juice, but eggs also. So all these things together, they don't allow leavening to happen. Okay, so that's why he's not going to get punished for such a thing. Take a little bit more water. Sorry about that. We had a fast today, so it's we're a little bit under the weather, right? It was very unfortunate. I was hoping today wouldn't be a fast day, but this war is prolonged. I almost feel like they're doing it intentionally, like I said before, you know? It's like there's timetables. They're talking about, the war will be over. Give them 3 months. It's like, it's a joke. They're not trying to win, Just make it over already. Now they have enough time. It's a cynical manipulation of the people.
The biggest problem is they let humanitarian aid because...
reload. They give them a chance to reload.
Exactly.
Yeah, ridiculous.
They just put into the siege. They don't even need to enter.
Yeah, it's like, okay, siege, but no siege, It's like, leave the door open so in case they really want to come in and attack you. We are completely disconnected from the Torah. Keeping the Torah means that we have to keep the entire Torah. The Torah doesn't just tell us about Shabbos and Kashrus. There's so many people wanting to make tzitzis. Do you know the Torah also says that your tzitzis should be blue? That's a surprise to some people. We don't do that. Yeah, but we should do that. The Torah also demands the construction of the temple. There's no bad guys at the temple now. We can go rebuild the temple. We're not ready for it. The Jewish people don't ask for it. So there you go. There's so much we should do. The Torah wants the Jewish people to live in the land of Israel, but everybody's not there. I don't know. And sort of we're dissuading people. We're making it uncomfortable for people to want to live in this country. It's a big problem. We have to make this place a haven for Jews. I know some guys tell me they're leaving Eretz Yisrael. Hamachametz lechem aponim lokeh. We just saw that. Okay. Achitim shel menachot. Let's move back a little bit in the process. You have to have wheat in order to make the menachos, right? Only a few menachos are made out of barley, so it's usually wheat. Ein lo tetinotam shema yachmitzu. You don't wet them. When do they wet the wheat? Okay. What is litita? This is something they do while the wheat is still in the husk. To separate the kernels from the chaff, you wet it. It removes the chaff better. Generally speaking, this wouldn't cause it to leaven, right? Think about it when they talk about how they have shmura mishas katsiro. That means the wheat didn't get wet at all from the moment they reaped it. Let me ask you a question. You're not worried about rain falling on the wheat. Let's say the wheat is in the field. It's nice and grown. It's Aviv time, right? It's late Nisan, early ER. Person's coming to get the new wheat. He's going to reap the wheat, right? Right at the beginning of Nisan, let's say, whatever it is, or right after Nisan, or it's Chol Hamoed. This is the best time because now you can take the crop. Normally, the barley's ready before the wheat, correct? Yeah, that's why the barley is the Omer offered on Chol Hamoed. But let's say it's a 6th day of Passover. You have wheat in your field, so you're going to reap that wheat in order to make matzah for the last days of Passover, right? It rained just the day before. So the wheat, you're not worried about the rain falling on the fully grown wheat in the fields. That's not going to cause it to leaven, right? Correct?
Yeah.
It rains, let's say it rains 5 minutes before you reap it. You are not worried about rain falling on your wheat while it's still standing, causing it to become chametz. So to really Ikar Adin, if you were to reap the wheat and then it gets wet while it's still in its whole but it's still in the whole form. Okay, it's still not in the husk. It's still a whole. Oh yeah, I'm forgetting my English here. Okay, it's still kama.
Yeah.
Okay. See, I forgot the English already. So I have to learn to talk English good. So that's not going to cause it to become chametz. You could even wash it. Let's say it has some dirt from the field. You could technically wash it. You're not worried that the water is going to seep into where the actual food part is, and that's going to cause it to become chametz, right? There's no such rory. Yeah, but okay, shmur mishas katsira. There, we showed him we never held of such a thing. So in this case, we don't do this though. because we have a high standard for temple, the temple menachos, we don't allow for wetting. Normally, we might have entertained such a thing, okay? That if it sits in the if it stays wet after the latita, maybe that could start the chametz process. So we don't do that. Sharei b'chutz lo tatinotan. This is done outside the temple, anyways, right? Ve'ein hakol zrizim l'shomron. There's a way to take your wheat even after it's reaped and wet it and clean it and remove the waste product and perhaps the dirt also, and not have it become chametz. It's perfectly possible. It just we're not going to allow that to happen. Not everybody outside the temple is a zariz. A zariz means people who are really careful about keeping the commandments. They say, who's the example of a zariz? The Kohanim in the temple. They know what they're doing. Regular people, we don't know if they know what they're doing. Well, Mincha Omer, here's an example of a grain product that we do wet. Okay, is actually on Passover, where not only do the mincha itself, it shouldn't become leavened. Even the regular food that everybody's eating shouldn't become leavened. It says here, Minchas Omer, Hoil v'hi shel tzibur lo tatinota. This is the tzibur's grain offering. So actually, they do wet it, they do clean it, they reap it on the second night of Passover, and it's to be offered on Passover itself on the second day. They do wet it, they do clean it, in order to separate the chaff. Sharia tzibur's reason they're going to make sure that even though they wetted it, they're going to let it dry properly so that the actual grain on the inside does not become wet and does not become chametz. Oh, good halacha. Let me think here. What did the Tosfos say? Tosfos disagree with this halacha over here. The way the Rambam says that he says, okay, if you put water in here, it wouldn't make it in the minchas nesachim, even though you're not supposed to put water, it wouldn't make it puzzle. Okay, interesting. This halacha, kaf aleph, what looks like kaf aleph for yudches, depending on whose number you use. Kol menachos nafos nilo shoth bifo sharin. All the baked menachos, that's 4 of them, and the solus isn't baked, so that one doesn't have water. But the 4 baked menachos, always good to review. 4 baked menachos are 2 in the oven, the flatbread and the loaves, and the 2 in the frying pan. Some are deep fried. I said they're both deep fried. Technically, by our standards, deep fried. But just one is in a pot basically. It has a lip, and some is a machvas, which is flat. It's in the oil, but it's a flat. Okay. So niloshos befoshrin, those are kneaded with warm water, not maim shalonu, not cold water from the fridge, not ice water. In the actual temple courtyard, they'd use lukewarm water. Umechamrim shelo yachmitzu, but we still make sure that the shamron, we still prevent them from becoming chametz. If you need flour with warm water, that's going to become chametz, even if you add oil to the mix. Once there's a certain amount of water, chametz happens. If you dilute the fruit juice, for example, you're talking about fruit juice doesn't cause chametz. Yes, but there's a certain dilution that will raise the pH eventually and allow for chimutz to happen. So it says here that, technically speaking, when people are preparing matzah, we're not supposed to be using warm water, right? That'll cause it to leaven faster. Because they're kneading these breads, these doughs in the azara, and they're being scrutinized, they're prevented from leavening. How do you prevent it from leavening? If you add warm water to flour, isn't the dough going to rise? How do you prevent it from rising? Test. How do you prevent dough from rising if it's already flour and water? What's the main way to prevent it from rising? You constantly work it. Okay. Anshe panim is rizimhein. The people working in the temple, whether the Kohanim or the Israelites who are doing this under the Kohanic supervision, they know what they're doing. They know to work it. They don't let go of the dough. Okay. The dough goes straight from where they're working it to the oven or to the frying pan, as it may be. The place where they cook the holiest sacrifices. Remember, the Kohanim have to eat those sacrifices in the Azara, and they can't let it leave the Azara. So there's a cooking section there. That's also where they bake the menachos. So you can imagine the Kohanim have a grill for meat, and they have a pot for meat, and they have an oven for baking menachos and frying pans for menachos. And whichever way, remember, the Kohanim can cook their meat whichever they want. So I hope that they have, whichever Kohanim are in charge of the cooking and the baking, they're the ones who know what they're doing. The prophet Yechezkel was shown in the future temple. This is the place where the Kohanim do the cooking. Asher Yofuad Amincha, and that's also where they bake the meal offerings. Kol menachot techinatan v'arkaratan b'chutz. All of these menachot, where are they done? Techina is they grind the wheat, right? And harkada is where they sift it, if I'm not mistaken. That's done outside the temple. There's no place to grind wheat and to sift the wheat. They bring the type of flour, the soleth that they're using, that's brought to the temple ready to go. But the kneading of the dough and the arranging it, remember, it has to be shaped right. There's a difference. You make a dough, one is to be baked in the oven, it has to be a loaf, one has to be a flatbread. So there's ways to do it. That's called the aricha and the afiyatan, the baking. Even though half of them are actually fried, that's also like a tolda of baking, like on Shabbos, right? What's the avmalacha? Afiyah, right? Bishul, or frying, etc. All different ways of cooking are toldas of afiyah. Okay, so it's one term for all of that. Got a question? 1 second. Let's see if this is relevant. Someone says that the translation of Malika. Remember, I asked a few weeks ago, what's the translation of Malika? Removal of the head. Okay, well, it's talking about specifically a bird. Is there an example of Malika of removal of the head elsewhere in Tanakh? I guess I should look this up. Okay, thank you very much for pointing that out. Who sent this? Okay, one of the guys sent it. Okay, all right. It's good that people are listening to the shir. Okay. The chol ma'asehen kisharim bazar. Not only that, doing all these acts, that which is done outside the temple and that which is done in the temple, it's kosher for a zar to do it. If you want to do some temple service, like slaughtering. Oh, we're not going to listen to voice messages during shir. It can be done by a non-Kohen. Ad shevo levera kmitza. The only time we get a Kohen has to be involved is once we get to the kmitza. The kmitza part is where the Kohen we saw takes a handful of the flour or whatever it is and puts it onto the mizbeach. There was a frying pan and a deep frying pan. Remember, the marcheshet has more of a lip, more of a pot, a frying pot. Jelly donuts, for example. Most of us fry our eggs in what's similar to a machavat, right? Put your pancakes and you put your eggs in a machavat, whereas a marcheshet is the thing in which they make jelly donuts. Which, by the way, our practice is the bracha on jelly donuts, because they're a type of pas. We say mizonos, and if you're kaveh suda on them, it's hamotzi. That's my personal opinion. And the first time you see the jelly donuts, you make a shechianu, because it's jelly donut season. Just kidding. Okay. Ushtem klei sharet. These are klei sharet umikadshin, and also they have a they sanctify. That is, we said all the menachos. When do they become sanctified? They have to be put in the kli, right? The kometz is put in the kli before it's put on. The Kohen doesn't just take it straight from his hand and then put it onto the altar. He first has to put into the kli. Okay, and the mincha itself is also brought in a kli. It's measured in a kli. The tanur shel mikdash shel matechadaya. The oven that they used in the temple was made out of metal. What's the chiddush? A metal oven. Our ovens made out of metal? No, some are made out of stone. A lot of times, classic ovens in the olden days were made out of what?
They were digging into the ground.
Well, maybe they're in the ground, but no, like structure ovens. So you have a picture. We're going to see a few chapters later what an oven looks like. Classic ovens were made out of brick or stone or clay, right? So there's a way to make a metal oven. That's more expensive. A metal oven conducts the heat differently. Okay, if you have a metal oven, the heat is conducted a lot more around the whole thing, right? Brick oven is less. It's more of an insulation. You know that? If you made an oven out of a lot of bricks, you could touch the outside, you might not get burnt, right? Because it insulates from the inside. But if you make it out of metal, it's hot all around, right? So nowadays, by the way, when they make matzah, there's a nafkamina. You have, like over here, all the operations that bake matzah here before Passover use these transportable metal ovens. The rabbi has 2 outside the shul. I could show it to you. And there's also one here that the people have their own matzah baking operation. It's always moving around, but they have a metal oven which is fired by propane. They use a propane tank, so that's a metal oven standalone. But you go, let's say, to fancy bakeries and other places that do their own bread. In Jerusalem, for example, they make pitas. They have a brick oven, right? And also pizza ovens. So there's a nafkamina. You make a nice brick oven, which is fueled by wood. So that gives you a real classic pizza. Most people use a cheap pizza oven, which is propane or electric, and it's metal and has different shelves, right? So you know what I'm talking about, those pizza ovens. So that makes just generic pizza, but you want artisan pizza, you need a brick oven. And some are actually metal, and they have fake brick on the outside or fake stone on the outside to make it look like it's a stone oven, but really it's not, right? So this is important. Why is it important that it's made on matechet? Why is that? This was pointed out to me by Gavriel. I had forgotten this. All the other kelim of the mikdash have to be made out of metal, right?
Yeah.
That's the halacha we saw with the menorah. Menorah couldn't be made out of wood. All the clay hamikdash have to be made out of some sort of metal. Ideally, things are made out of metal. What's the best? Gold, and if not, silver. And that which cannot be gold or silver is made out of nechoshes. Nechoshes means bronze. But in these cases, usually they didn't make ovens out of bronze. When they make ovens out of steel or iron, basically, it's a form of what's called barzel. Barzel is also just like nechoshes means copper, but really it means alloys of copper. The most prominent one and the strongest one is bronze. Right? Most of the time in the Torah, when it talks about nechoshes, it means bronze. The main component of bronze is what you and I call copper, the elemental stuff.
Copper, and the other one is
No, they put in some other stuff, alloys of it, but it's mostly copper. Okay, that's the point. And its color is due to the copper. So too, when we say barzel, we mostly mean iron, but it's not just raw iron. Normally, the iron is made into steel. The machine's been heated, and there's some other things in there. So steel lasts longer and stronger than basic iron. So most of the time, when Chazar are talking about items made out of iron, they mean steel. And nowadays, we don't even use the old type of steel. Why is it that they talk about Iron Age and the Bronze Age? Things from the Iron Age didn't really last. They all eventually rust away. And even if they're made into steel. Whereas the Bronze Age stuff, bronze doesn't. So everything that was made out of bronze is still with us. But nowadays we use stainless steel. So I think that's what the type of thing you would use in the base mikdash also. The point is that the kalim, because it's a kli for the processing of sacrificial items, and it sanctifies them, see? It's clay sharet and it's mikadshin, so it couldn't be made out of stone. It had to be made out of metal. And in this case, it was made out of iron. And God willing, when they rebuild the temple, also they'll make an iron oven for ovens for the baking of the menachos. Just like the frying pan itself was also made out of some sort of metal. Although I would imagine that the metal, I guess the frying pan also would be made of bronze or out of some sort of steel. Mitzvah selah so kol mincha k'mitzvataha muraba Torah. The 13th paragraph begins with the commandment that every mincha has to be done according to the mitzvah of the Torah. So we'll end with that here. And we wish everybody a peaceful Sabbath, a peaceful life. They receive the return of all their soldiers to their homes and all the captives to their homes, and the destruction of the wicked speedily in our days. Amen.
We would like to encourage our viewers to share these videos with friends and send in your responses. If you would like to obtain Birkon Nusach Eretz Yisrael or invite the rabbi for a speaking engagement, please email us at office@machonshilo.org.